Hi there, my name is Steve Schmiller, and for those who don't know me and new to my channel, I make paintings like this, and this, and this, the old-fashioned way, without any technical cheats, just decades of diligent practice. And in this video, I'm going to talk about my brushes, and this thing, which I sometimes put on my brushes. I get questions about that all the time, so let's get to it. What a better way to talk about the brushes I use than to show a work in progress. So this is a small 7x7 inch painting. On my last video I said I couldn't wait to work large again, but here I am contradicting myself. And you're probably already wondering, what are those weird cylinders on my brushes? Okay, yes, so before we go too far, I've got to explain what this weird thing is that I put on my brushes. Let's get in the Wayback Machine. So in 2017, I broke the wrist on my left hand, and you can see in the picture here, that's my dominant hand, so I had to use my right hand to paint. I really didn't want to stop working on this piece. It was already half finished, so I spent the next 6 weeks just working with my right hand. So this is actually the brush that I'll be using for this small painting. Just kidding, ha 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 ha, jokes, jokes, jokes. Actually what I've got here is a number 0, a number 2, and a number 4 round. These ones are kind of worn out. This is a scroll brush or a rigger. So these are the cylinders that go on them. They come in different sizes. You can just Google foam grip expander and you will find these. I have tape on some of these ones so they can fit a little bit better in the smaller holes. And they're usually used for like anybody who's rehabilitating their hands or something. When I had my hand injury, the Toronto Hand Clinic gave me some of these, and then afterwards I just ordered more. So they come in lots of different sizes, and they relieve hand strain. So if you're painting for many hours, like 8 hours a day or something like I often have done, then those little muscles right there will get really sore really easily, and I don't want to have that happen. So these are also just like the same brushes that I have in many like bulk packs. That's what they look like when they're new. They look like really sharp, and I think that's one of the main keys to a lot of detail, is just to use a newer brush. Now, all of that said, I do have to mention once again, as I've done in a previous video, that this type of method where you're using a small brush gripping right up close with a lot of repetitive little marks is counter to a lot of painterly methods that want you to use the loose kind of marks with a long-handled brush, gripping the brush at the end and making kind of flick of the wrist gestures like that without bracing the hand. Just have to mention that so I cover all of my bases here. While it is very important to have nice materials that can facilitate our process, the most important thing by far, in my opinion, is the way that we use the brush. And of course, our brush is attached to our hand, which is attached to our brain. And so it's the way that we're thinking when we use the brush. At this stage in a painting, when I have many of the areas blocked in and I'm working wet into wet paint a la prima, I'm actually using extremely light touch. That is one thing that I've noticed when teaching oil painting classes, especially beginner oil painting classes, is that when you start out, you're scrubbing large areas, as they say, start with a broom, end with a needle. When I'm getting to these kinds of points, what I'm doing is just like the lightest possible touch in certain areas. You barely have to breathe on the paint and it will move. And just in case you have a super short attention span, here's an explosion and some other sound. What's that? This area is probably actually a better example of a super soft brush technique. What I mean by that is at first, of course, here I'm applying the paint relatively opaquely, fairly thick, and then what I will do is wipe out the brush so there's almost no paint in it, and then use that same brush to adjust the edges and soften quite a bit. There is an old general rule to use the biggest brush that makes sense, and in this case the number 4 round is big enough for me here, but there's just some things you cannot do unless you have a small brush, I find, but I just remind myself to not keep using the small brush constantly and always go back to a bigger brush if it makes more sense. So I've spoken before about how painting small, thin, dark lines is usually best if you don't paint them small and thin and you paint the background around them. In this case, I'm going to be painting some scrub brush, and it's actually how I prepared the brush. If you'll notice on that last little clip, I was kind of rolling it on the palette to prepare the brush and almost painting on the palette in order to kind of give myself an idea of how the brush mark would look once I get it on the actual painting. This is an old trick that I like to use where I kind of plot out the highlights in little dots, just kind of distributing a very specific amount of the paint instead of putting like one thick line. Then I can assess it and control it and kind of blend it as I'm doing now. I think these areas at this kind of scale are just going to require a really steady hand and a lot of patience and bracing the hand as well with a newish kind of brush as this rigger is here. It's got a pretty good point to it. And at this stage, I'm pretty much finished. And I should also mention that this is not my main oeuvre, my body of work. This is actually just a really small, quick piece for me. Check out my website if you want to see my main, larger paintings. And check out the video description if you'd like to know more about the story of this painting or the character in it. Now I'm going to just soften a few little areas, and then we have the final reveal. So I hope you liked this video. If you didn't, too bad, because it's already the end and you watched it and you wasted your time. You can go to Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the video, and support this channel. And it's really cool. I'm actually now just able to monetize, I think, officially. So just a huge thank you to anybody that's ever supported, liked the channel and subscribed in the past. I will have more videos to come. The more support I get, the more motivated I get to make more videos.